Hello there, and welcome to my library. Please come sit by the fire, and I'll read you a story. Let's see here. Here's a good one. This is one of my favorite books, called A Journey of Words. Let's see. Oh, this is a good one. The Whaler's Dues by Brian Paone. Yes, so just relax, and I'll tell you the story. She breaks my heart every time I see her. Willie raised his unshaven chin to point across the restaurant. Big Riff looked in the direction indicated. Yeah, and your wallet. I've probably paid for a college fund 3 times over, Willie replied, staring at his favorite stripper. I'm gonna talk to her. Really? I don't think there are rules about talking to dancers when they're off duty. What do I have to lose? Willie maneuvered his way across the scattered tables and lunch patrons. She noticed him approach and seductively wrapped her brown hair around her neck, where it rested on one shoulder. Willie swallowed hard and almost coughed from nervousness. Hey there, Willie, she said and smiled. He tried his best to hide his disappointment when he noticed her stealthily slide a wedding ring off her finger and into her coat pocket. It's nice to see you outside of work, Willie said. You mean with my clothes on? She chuckled. No, that's not what I meant. Willie could feel blood rushing to his cheeks. Aw, you're so adorable when you're embarrassed. She grabbed the hem of her red dress with her left hand. Willie stopped breathing as she slowly raised the fabric past her knee and stopped, revealing just enough thigh to get his heart racing. I like messing with ya, she said as she let go of the dress and returned to a more modest position. Did you have something to ask me? Or were you just coming over to keep me company? Willie had to think fast. The wedding ring had distracted him and knocked him off his game. Did he really think he would have had a chance with her anyway, even if she wasn't married? Or even not a stripper, for that matter? Since we're outside your place of employment, could you tell me your name? Kelpie, she laughed. I was hoping for your real name, not your stage name, he said, disappointed, realizing she wasn't going to drop the facade, even outside the walls of the club. I can't, she shook her head. You understand, right, babe? Unfortunately, I do. Do you want to sit down? Nah, I'm here with Riff. Kelpie spotted Big Riff watching them and gave him an enthusiastic wave. He raised his hand slightly off the table in a haphazard motion. It was nice to see you, Willie. She stabbed the fillet of sole on her plate. Are you coming to the club anytime soon? I miss you. Willie knew she was toying with him. This was all part of the act to keep a loyal customer. He wasn't about to get charmed by the pizzazz of a stripper. I'll come by soon. Kelpie swallowed a mouthful of fish and washed it down with sparkling wine. Willie lifted the bottle and inspected the label, trying to impress her by pretending he was some wine connoisseur. He was sure she could see right through his antics. It's a cheap $5 bottle, Kelpie said. Feeling defeated, Willie excused himself and returned to his table. She's married, dude. What? Big Riff sounded surprised. She didn't exactly say it, but I saw her remove a wedding ring from her finger. She's gotta keep the illusion, even outside the club, you know? She's gotta keep those dollars flowing. Oh, shut up. Stop teasing me. Kelpie placed her napkin in the center of her empty plate. Small flakes of sole were stuck to the tines of her fork. She stood and winked at Willie as she left the restaurant. Big Riff snapped his fingers loudly in front of Willie's eyes, breaking his stare. Come back to reality, Big Riff said. Ah, she knows how to drive a guy right back. You, my friend, are pathetic, Big Riff interrupted. And I need to get going. I'm working the late shift. What time are you getting off? 2. See you at Harry's? Yeah. Don't expect me before 3 though. I'll have your first drink waiting. Sounds like a plan. Big Riff threw a $20 bill on the table and left his best friend alone to finish his lunch. The rain fell as if the sky was enraged. Large drops pounded the neon sign over the entrance, making angry hissing noises. Big Riff entered Harry's bar, physically slicing through the cigarette smoke that hung in the air, and looked at his watch. Only a couple of hours until sunrise. Damn. The music was thumping. The 2 girls on stage gyrated in unison like hungry jungle cats, seductively flipping their hair as they tried to score another dollar bill by making ridiculous-looking faces at the gentleman clientele. Big Riff found Willie at a table with only 1 seat. He pulled up an empty chair and slapped his best friend on the shoulder. "Riff, my man, you've already missed half the girls." "Oh? I thought you said you'd have a drink waiting for me." Big Riff singled the bartender. "Kelpie's already been up 3 times. Big Riff sighed. He had really hoped she wouldn't be working tonight, so Willie would stop obsessing so much. Big Riff reminisced about the first time he had watched her dance. He hadn't believed in love at first sight until that night. The way she moved, so much expression and something else. Something melancholy under those fake smiles and winks for money. Big Riff just knew something fragile and sanctified was hidden deep inside her. It pained him whenever he was forced to face the realization he'd never be anything more to Kelpie than an ATM that only dispenses $1 bills. Hearing Willie talk insistently about her made Big Riff want to toss a multitude of alcoholic beverages down his throat and sneer at the other drunks, dressed in their obnoxious plaid shirts, while they gawked at Kelpie like a piece of meat. "Riff? Sorry, Harry. Lost on my own island again. Here's your gin," the owner/bartender said, and placed a napkin printed with Harry's logo underneath the glass. Harry had barely reached the bar when Big Riff called his name. Harry looked back at the table and noticed the glass was empty. Big Riff shook off the burn of the alcohol by clenching all his facial muscles. "Another one?" Harry asked. "Tonight, my friend, keep 'em coming." Before Harry could return with a second gin, the stage door opened, and Kelpie sashayed toward the pool. The drunks up front cheered, their wallets now magically in plain view, eager to toss Kelpie their hard-earned money for a few seconds of attention. "She knows how to take control of a room, doesn't she?" Willie yelled, as the music's volume suddenly increased. Before Big Riff could think of a reply, Harry returned. Big Riff nodded in thanks and swallowed half the gin in one gulp. The liquid burned his lips, exactly how he liked. He glanced at Kelpie and had a hard time meeting her gaze without blushing, followed by the uncontrollable need to look anywhere else. Staring into his drink, he knew Kelpie must have removed her skimpy bra by the whoops and hollers from the men up front. Against his better judgment, Big Riff stole a peek and saw the town shitbag rubbing her bra over his face like he just won the lottery. "Waste of gravity," Big Riff muttered. "What's that, hotshot?" someone said, firmly grabbing Big Riff's shoulders and shaking him with a little too much gusto. Big Riff rolled his eyes. "You lost, Gerald?" "Nah, man. You sober?" "Too sober to be around you." "Hey, how'd that singing gig pan out?" Gerald asked. "Who told you?" Big Riff turned to face the man. "Please. This is a small town, Riffy. Everybody knows everybody else's business." "Whatever." Big Riff waved off Gerald with his hand and turned toward his half-drank gin. Being anywhere else would be okay right now, as long as it wasn't watching Kelpie degrade herself to the likes of these idiots. The next song started and Kelpie responded by leaning backward like a gymnast, gripping the pole with only one hand. "You tell him?" Big Riff yelled at Willie. "Tell him what?" "Did you tell Gerald that I auditioned for Strange Avenues?" "I wouldn't tell that piece of shit anything about you." "Didn't you hear him ask me?" "Nah, I tune everything out when Kelpie's on stage," Willie said without breaking his stare on her legs wrapped around the pole. Big Riff pursed his lips and finished his drink in one commanding gulp. "Harry, another one for Riff," Willie yelled toward the bar. "Oh, so you heard me put down an empty glass, but you didn't hear Gerald's voice? Man, you're a buzzkill tonight. Last time I invite you any." Willie halted abruptly when Kelpie grabbed a chair and stepped from it to their tabletop. She gently placed the tip of her red stiletto on Willie's chest and slowly dragged her shoe toward his neck. Big Riff could smell her intoxicating perfume blanket the atmosphere around the table. He willed every muscle to move, maybe head toward the bathroom, but he was frozen. Harry leaned over Big Riff's shoulder with his third gin and placed a glass on the disintegrating napkin. The gaggle of drunks up front turned to watch as Kelpie bent her knee and leaned closer into Willie, her shoe resting just below his chin. He trapped her thigh with both hands, and Big Riff could only imagine how smooth and flawless her skin must feel. Then Willie placed his lips on her delicious-looking knee, and Kelpie threw her head backward and giggled. Without warning, Kelpie pulled away and jumped off the table. All gazes followed her as she strutted behind the bar to the beat of the song and emerged with a bottle of tonic water. Big Riff wasn't aware she returned to his table until he smelled her perfume behind him. She leaned around his body, making sure every curve of her torso scraped along the skin of his arm. Big Riff thought he might pass out right there. Kelpie unscrewed the cap of the tonic water and poured the liquid into his gin until the mixture reached the top of the glass. "There you go, sweetie. You need to pace yourself," Kelpie said loud enough for everyone to hear. The drunks up front roared with laughter, covering their mouths with their hands as if they just heard the best, worst insult ever. Big Riff even saw two of them high-five each other. "Why do you care how much I drink?" Big Riff couldn't even look at her face. He kept his gaze glued to her arm. Kelpie's lips brushed his earlobe as she whispered, "I care more than you know." Then she yelled so everyone could hear, "I don't care how much you drink. You've never thrown a single dollar my way." The drunks up front began to boo loudly. "But this one over here," Kelpie continued as she sat on Willie's lap and hovered her lips just above his, "has probably paid me enough to retire." For the first time, watching her tease Willie had a different effect, since Big Riff knew she was married. Kelpie, or whatever might be her real name, had a husband at home while she dancing naked and letting men grope her for dollar bills. What if her husband was here? What if he approved? Worse yet, what if watching aroused him? That wasn't the kind of husband Kelpie needed, Big Riff thought. He knew what she needed. A man like him. Big Riff pushed his chair backward and headed for the bar. He didn't turn around to see if Kelpie or Willie had noticed that he had stormed away from their shenanigans. "Harry, just a beer, please." "You sure you don't want something stronger? You look a little frazzled." "Harry, just don't." "Sure thing, boss." Harry popped the cap of a Yulin and placed it on the bar. "I gotta get a grip," Big Rick thought. "No, I gotta get out of here." When Big Riff turned toward his table, he noticed Kelpie was gone and Willie was alone nursing his drink. Big Riff reluctantly returned to his seat. "How old do you think she is?" Willie asked. "I don't know, man. Can we talk about something else? God, she could be 17. She certainly looks it. I doubt she would be married at that age, let alone working here, in this part of town. The house lights suddenly annulled the soft glow of the stage's mood lighting. Looks like the girls are done for the night, Willie commented. Last call, Harry screamed. The magic words, Willie muttered. The drunks filed outside, leaving Willie and Big Ruff alone with Harry, washing glasses behind the bar, and the girls backstage. Come on, drink up. Let's get out of here, Big Ruff said. Willie finished his whiskey in one final swig and rose to his feet. He immediately swayed and collapsed, clipping the edge of the table with his head. The empty glasses rolled off the table and shattered when they struck the floor. Jesus, Willie, Big Ruff said, rushing around the table. The backstage door opened and two girls peeked out their heads. When Kelpie saw Willie on the floor, she darted toward them. Big Ruff looked up, just as Harry reached Willie and saw Kelpie, dressed in jeans, a red shirt, and sneakers, heading straight at them. Hey, Willie, can you hear me? Harry asked, tapping him repeatedly with the backside of his hand. Huh? Yeah, I can hear you. What happened? Willie asked, opening his eyes. You took a header, Harry replied. Willie rubbed his temple and sat up. Here, let me help you, Kelpie said. She grabbed him underneath his armpit and pulled him to his feet. You might want to get checked out. Make sure you don't have a concussion. I think I'll be all right, Willie replied, bowing his head. Kelpie grabbed Willie's hands and squeezed them. You should get checked out, she said sternly. Her voice was strangely low and commanding. Big Ruff took an immediate step backward. The small hairs on the back of his neck stood straight up and sent a shiver down his spine. Come on, Willie, I'll drive you, Harry said. You okay to lock up? He asked Kelpie. Sure thing, Harry. I got it. Just give me a second, he told her. After Harry had safely secured the day's income in a lockbox, he slung Willie's arm around his neck for support. Have a safe night, girls, Kelpie called as the rest of the dancers left the bar with Willie and Harry. So here we are, Riff, she added. Here we are indeed. Why have you been so cold to me lately? I have no idea what you're talking about, Kelpie. Oh, sure you do. You barely look at me anymore when I'm working. Are you afraid I have cooties and they might be contagious? She giggled and punched him in the arm. I just got a lot on my mind is all. Who is she? Why do you think it's a woman? Come on, Riff. How long has it been since you've been with anyone? I guess you could say it's a woman. Look at you. Riff all in love. It suits you. They exited the bar and Kelpie locked the front door. As they walked past a small parking lot adjacent to the building, Kelpie pointed to a vehicle. Hey, look. Marty left his windows down. Oh, I hate that guy, Big Riff retorted. Oh, you don't really hate him. You're just jealous because for your whole life, all you ever wanted was to be the singer of a band. And Marty is a local rock star. It's not your fault he voted against you joining Strange Avenues. Wait, how did you... Who told you that? I know more about you than you know about yourself. She peered into the car. Marty left his mandolin in the back seat. That frickin' mandolin. I'd like to hit him over the head with it, Big Riff said with a chuckle. Take it. What? Steal the mandolin. No way, Kelpie. I might hate the guy, but I'm not a thief. But it'll make you feel good. You know, stick it to the man and all that jazz. Who are you? Big Riff asked, laughing. I'm serious. In fact, take it and leave a ransom note. Now I know you've lost your marbles. Tell him you'll return the mandolin only if he lets you sing at one of their next shows. You, my dear, are knucking futs. Kelpie was quiet just long enough for Big Riff to think she might drop the whole thing. Then she puckered her lips and scrunched her forehead. I dare you, she said through clenched teeth, her tonal register almost demonic. Big Riff involuntarily moved toward the car, tried to turn and call for help, but his mouth wouldn't open, and his hand reached through the window. I've lost control of my body, he thought in a panic. Kelpie stood, arms folded, grinning. No, don't touch it. Don't take it, he thought, willing himself as hard as he could, but it was futile. His fingers disobeyed his brain's wishes, and he grasped the mandolin tightly. Good, good. Now pull it out, and you're home free. Who was she? No, better yet, what was she? Don't worry, Riff. No one's watching. That seems to be the least of my worries right now. It might be better if I got caught. Maybe this spell, or whatever, would be broken. The mandolin was successfully freed from Marty the rock star's vehicle, and Big Riff regained control of his extremities and vocal cords again. What the Shh! She took a step toward him. Don't touch me! Stay right there! Shut up! Listen! Big Riff could hear sirens in the distance. They're getting closer, Kelpie said. We gotta go! How in the world? Kelpie didn't wait for him to finish. She grabbed his free hand and they raced toward the waterfront. Big Riff let the mandolin go in mid-stride, a loud clatter ricocheting off the surrounding buildings. Faster! They know you took it! But I didn't steal the damn thing! Big Riff said, short-winded, trying to match Kelpie's pace. This is insane! Just keep up! Where are we going? Big Riff's legs felt every step, the muscles in his calves already burning. To the Rosalind. Who is Rosalind? She's not a who! You'll see! The sirens came closer. The blue lights bounced off the darkness in the distance. The marina was just ahead of them. Big Riff could see a whaleboat anchored at the pier, bobbing with the waves. That's her! Kelpie yelled, pointing to the longboat. We gotta get to her before the deputies get to you, or you'll never have a fighting chance. I've never seen such a thing like that before in my whole life, Big Riff exclaimed. Don't worry about it right now. Just get on board. Kelpie, what the hell's going on? Big Riff almost couldn't finish the sentence. His lungs burned. Speaking while running was almost impossible. The Rosalind is your only chance to pay your dues and fulfill your contrition. Pay my dues? That's it, Kelpie. Big Riff stopped and placed his hands on his knees. I'm not running anymore until you tell me what you're talking about. Kelpie looked over Big Riff's head and her eyes widened. No time! We gotta go! They just turned the corner at Harry's. Kelpie raced for the dock. Big Riff did his best to keep pace without fainting. Their footfalls on the wooden pier echoed across the water. Big Riff could see the silhouette of a man on the whaleboat, waving to them in encouragement to run faster. Just get on the boat! Kelpie yelled and burst into a full sprint. Big Riff reached the vessel and the man grabbed his wrist to help him over the side of the boat. Who is it this time, Mary? The man asked as he pushed the throttle forward. The Rosalind's engines whirred to life, and the boat propelled them from the dock. Sheriff's lawmen, 2 of them, I think, Kelpie answered. At least it's not the cattlemen of the 5 Sisters of Cantal. I don't ever want to go through a bloodbath like on Glen Shiel again. Wait, Mary? That's your name? And you went through what with who? Let's all calm down, Kelpie said. Yes, my name's Mary. Now you know. This is my husband. Mary's husband took one hand from the wheel and held it out for a shake. Biggles. Riff. But by the sound of it, you already know that. Drop me off at Rattlesnake Trail, Mary said to her husband. Sure thing. Biggles steered the Rosalind farther into the blackness of the open sea. I've lived here my whole life, and I've never heard of Rattlesnake Trail, Big Riff stated. It's right there, Biggles said. Big Riff squinted and saw the outline of an island through the mist. He looked back at the mainland as it faded from view. Nothing tonight had made any sense whatsoever. A black cloud extinguished the stars and thunder clapped so loudly that Big Riff almost jumped off the whaleboat. Get me there, Biggles, Mary screamed. The bisect started early this time. I know, Mary. I'm pushing her as hard as I can. I'll get you to the island in time. I always do. The sky opened and the rain fell in buckets. Big Riff wiped the water from his brow and looked at his hands. They were black. The precipitation falling from the clouds seemed to contain more mud than water. Mary extended her hands to her husband. She was wet and brown. "It's the dirty waters, Biggles. Time's up. You got it. I'll get you there, Mary," Biggles snapped. Big Riff noticed little black specks running down her jeans. A chill breeze pushed the boat against the tide. Big Riff turned toward the mainland one last time. The glow of the suburban lights had already faded to black. A sandbar a few yards from the island brought the Rosalind to a halt. Without hesitation, Mary jumped overboard into the shallow waves. "Go! Get out of here!" she called from the surrounding water. "Good luck, Riff." Within seconds, the darkness of Rattlesnake Trail swallowed Mary. Big Riff suddenly found himself alone with a complete stranger who had a funny-sounding name and a railboat he had never heard of before, in the middle of nowhere. And it was only Monday. The Rosalind gently rocked back and forth from the small swells. A thin sliver of the moon was just barely visible above Rattlesnake Trail, now fat behind them. "Hungry?" Biggs asked as he opened the top of a large container. "I have some cold stew." "No, I don't want anything to eat. I want answers." "Suit yourself," Biggles replied and scooped a spoonful into his mouth. "Bring me back right now." "Sorry, bub. No can do." "This is kidnapping. What you're doing is illegal. And so is stealing Marty's mandolin. You can never go back." "What do you mean?" Big Riff asked, taking an aggressive step forward. "There's nothing for you to go back to. After the bisect happens, the fabric of your reality splits, and you're on a new life path now." "What are you talking about, you fucking loon? What's a bisect? What was all that dirty rain? Where the hell did Rattlesnake Trail come from? Why was Kelpie in such a panic to get off the boat? Calm down there, soldier. You're gonna hurt yourself with all those questions." Biggles exaggerated every bite as he ate his stew, opening his mouth wide and chomping the potato and beef loudly. The sound of the obnoxious chewing, like nails on a chalkboard, made Big Riff want to punch Biggles square in the nose. "Don't antagonize me," Big Riff said sternly, but relaxed his clenched fist. Biggles dropped the bowl of stew, hitting the railboat's deck with a clank. He pushed his finger into Big Riff's chest. "Look, Riff. You think I want to be here with you again? Always wondering if you're the one who will replace me? You think I like saving your hide over and over, always at the last goddamn minute? Like we're in some Hollywood action flick? I don't. And to be honest, I'm getting pretty sick of this cycle." Big Riff slapped Biggles' finger. "Don't ever touch me again." After a glaring stare, Big Riff finally asked, "And what's with this over and over crap?" The two men stood in silence, the boat creaking every time it rocked back and forth over the waves. Then the night became quieter as the engine hiccuped and seized. "What just happened?" "Ran out of diesel." "You mean we're stuck out here?" Big Riff asked frantically. "Nothing to worry about. I'm stuck with coal. We'll get there." "Coal? I don't understand." Biggles pulled on a trapdoor and descended to shovel heaps of coal into the deck furnace. Big Riff blinked repeatedly to ward off its rising heat. "Now the boat runs on coal?" "Only if I run out of diesel. Rosalind is multifaceted." Big Riff sat on a wooden bench next to the spilt cold stew, watching Biggles work. "It's obvious you aren't going to tell me where we're going." "Riff, I can't. I would be in jeopardy of losing my post. And if that happens, I'll never see Mary again. This job is the only way I'm allowed to see her." "And what's your job exactly?" "Skippering the Rosalind." "I had a feeling your answer would be cryptic or useless," Biggs said while sighing and shaking his head. "I never pinned Kelpie to be the marrying type." "I can't tell if that's a backhanded dig at me for being married to someone of her status, or something else entirely." "You mean a stripper?" Big Riff replied. I feel like you are purposely taunting me, Riff. And no, I didn't mean a stripper. Mary is many things. Stripper is at the bottom of that list. I never thought in a million years I would ever be with her. I was madly in love with her for such a long time. Too afraid to ask her out. She was a southern girl. Biggles closed the hatch and took the wheel again. Why does being from the South have any relevance? Let's just say Mary Bostock was a round hole, and I was a square peg, for lack of a better cliche. I found enough liquid courage one night in the late hours of a sunset rendezvous. You make it sound so romantic, Big Riff retorted. I know you secretly love her. That's why I'm not going to take the bait of your sarcasm. Now wait just a minute. It's no secret, Riff. I know it. Mary knows it. The universe knows it. And if I were you, I'd be afraid to love her. Realizing he was a captive for the duration of the ride, no matter where or how long it took or how bizarre it might become, Big Riff decided not to probe any further. Each answer just created more questions. This was a battle he couldn't win. There, Biggles said, pointing. That's where we're heading. Big Riff squinted through the mist and saw a landmass in the distance. Shouldn't the sun have come up by now? We've been in the boat for hours. The sun will be rising ever again, Biggles said and jumped into the water. Are you coming? Big Riff grabbed onto the railing and hesitated. Fine. Stay on the boat. Hope you know your way back. Wait! Wait! Big Riff jumped over the side, landing in the frigid North Atlantic water. When he reached the shore, Biggles slapped Big Riff on the back. This place looked different every time I visit, Biggles commented. How many times have you come here? Every time I have to bring you, he answered and bounded toward the tree line just beyond the beach. I hate talking to you, Big Riff mumbled and reluctantly followed. The thicket became denser the farther they traveled, and the forest was so tall the treetops swallowed the sky completely. Then the trees thinned and the landscape opened to another environment. Where are we going? The canyon. Look over there. Big Riff could see a large canyon lined with hundreds of hanging fluorescent lights, illuminating the inside of the gully like a sports stadium at nighttime. It's beautiful. After some time of being ignored, Big Riff turned to Biggles. No one was there. Hey! Big Riff yelled into the forest behind him. Biggles! Where'd you go? Silence. All Big Riff could hear was a faint hum of the lights. Then the sound of an engine in the distance. At first he was certain Biggles had returned to the Rosalind and was leaving the island, marooning Big Riff forever. But then he saw a vehicle moving at great speed toward him from the other side of the canyon. Biggles! He yelled again. Is that you? The vehicle approached quickly, the sound of its engine getting louder by the second. Big Riff took a step forward, the tip of his sneakers hanging over the ledge to the canyon's gorge below. He now clearly recognized a red convertible with its top down, speeding toward him on the canyon floor. Biggles, this is your last chance. Quit fooling around with me. Silence. No answer. Then all the lights winked out inside the canyon. With the aid of a few shining stars, he could still see the approaching car in the dark abyss, and in a panic, lunged back through the forest. Small twigs whipped his bare arms and stung his face as he barreled toward the beach. When he reached the outskirts of the woods, the only sound he heard was the water lapping at the sand. The shoreline was empty, devoid of Biggles or the Rosalind. Fuck you, asshole, he whispered and kicked a divot of sand into the water. The sound of the convertible was exponentially closer now. The roar of its engine seemed to be literally right behind. Big Riff was knocked down by the car's rear quarter panel as it drove past him. Lifting his face from the beach, he quickly wiped the sand from his eyes and lips. The tires spat a stream of sand over his body as it accelerated. Big Riff stood, and the car came to a skidding halt. He saw the backside of two heads, one driving and one in the passenger seat. The convertible idled loudly. Neither occupant turned around to look at him. You almost killed me, he growled. No movement. Hey! Did you even see me? Big Riff walked toward the red car. Say something or I'm gonna kick your... Big Riff immediately stilled every muscle in his body. He had reached a distance where the reflections appeared in the side view mirrors. Big Riff backpedaled so quickly he accidentally tripped himself and hit the sand hard. Using both hands to frantically crawl backward away from the vehicle, he managed to eventually break into a full sprint, putting as much distance between himself and the two people in the car as possible. He rounded the natural curvature of the shoreline, his sneakers kicking sand behind him with every step. And there she was, bobbing up and down with the current. The Rosalind hadn't been moved farther down the beach, but she was still here. Big Riff could leave this godforsaken island. Biggles, we gotta go! He yelled toward the boat as he approached. Fire the engines, we gotta leave now! Still, no response or any signs of life. He reached her starboard side, flung himself over the railing, and lifted the hatch to the steam engine. As soon as the trapdoor opened, the Rosalind sparked to life. Biggles? The rowboat launched into the dark ocean with breakneck speed, and Big Riff was thrown to the deck. He steadied his legs and stood upright. The red convertible remained on the beach, and the two passengers hadn't moved. Still no sign of Biggles. The Rosalind seemed to be operating completely of her own free will. Big Riff stood next to the helm for quite a bit of time without once steering the boat himself. Biggles was definitely not anywhere on board, and the Rosalind seemed to know exactly where she was headed. As he traveled farther from the island, the mist had dissipated, but now it became dense again. He walked to the bow and strained to focus through the blurry atmosphere suspended over the water. Just as he suspected, another island loomed ahead. The Rosalind steamed straight for the shore and stopped abruptly when her rudders bore into the sand. Now what? Big Red asked aloud. No sooner were the words out of his mouth when he spotted a red balloon dancing with the breeze along the shoreline. He glanced up and down the beach, but it was empty. He strained his ears. The sound of a child's laughter rose above the wind. The red balloon hopped once more and came to rest in front of that waterline. Big Riff heard rustling in the trees. A young girl, no more than 6 years old, came bounding from the forest. She skipped toward the balloon, humming a nursery rhyme, the ruffles of her red dress flapping in the breeze. Without hesitation, Big Riff jumped off the Rosalind into the frigid water. "Little girl!" he yelled as he muscled through the tide. The girl didn't acknowledge him. Her skipping remained unfaltering as she headed straight for the red balloon. Big Riff quickened his pace against the crawl of the waves. Maybe she held the answers he sought. Then it became incredibly difficult for him to walk. Every step felt like his thigh muscles were failing. The girl closed the distance between herself and the red balloon at a much faster pace. At this rate, she would scoop her balloon and be gone before he even exited the water. Now he could hardly stand. His knees buckled and his ankles wouldn't support the weight of his body anymore. The last thing he saw before he crumbled into the water was a little girl retrieving her runaway balloon. Big Riff felt the ocean consume him, blanketing every inch of his body. He tried to sit up, but the effort was useless. The water was too strong. Just when he was positive he couldn't hold his breath any longer, the tide receded like a shot. The ocean was stripped from above his body so rapidly he choked on the water, torpedoing into his nostrils and splashing the back of his throat. After coughing up the water in his airways, Big Riff heaved in a deep breath of clean air. He quickly looked behind him. The Rosalind sat crooked on the sand, abandoned by the water that had kept her afloat. The tide now rested just behind the whaleboat. He hastily turned his attention to the beach. The red balloon and the little girl were gone. Standing in their place was a young teenager, staring at the grounded boat. She gripped her elbows with both hands and her body shook violently. Big Riff got to his feet, sand falling from the creases of his wet clothes. "Hey, are you okay?" He took a few cautious and non-threatening steps toward her. She didn't reply or break her stare. Big Riff continued to approach her, his right hand extended, as if he were calming an aggressive animal. "Miss, I won't hurt you. Can you tell me what's going on?" She remained motionless until Big Riff stood directly in front of her. She slowly turned and faced the tree line, her back to Big Riff in the ocean. And that's when he saw the evidence of a fight. "Oh my God. Are you okay?" he repeated. He reached to touch the red dress hanging loosely on her body. He ran his fingers along the ribs and tears of the fabric. The lacerations on the dress were random, and the threads appeared to have been violently frayed. "Are you bleeding? Did this just happen? Jesus, this looks like a tiger attacked you." The teenage girl remained mute. Her trembling didn't subside either. The bottom of her tattered red dress flapped like a flag in the wind. Big Riff removed his hand from the torn garment. "He was angry," she muttered quietly. "He found out I fell in love with someone else." "Who was angry? Is that who did this to you? Who touched you?" She turned and looked straight into his eyes, her hair whipping into her mouth. "Biggles." Small red dots of anger pinpricked his vision. "That bastard. I'm gonna get you out of here. But we gotta get the boat back into the water. I'm not quite sure what happened here. It's just another notch in the list of crazy things." "I'll help you get the boat into the water." The teenage girl followed Big Riff to the railboat. Just as rapidly as the tide had receded, the water rushed toward the shore, flooding underneath the Rosalind's hull. Within moments, she was upright and buoyant again, rocking back and forth with the current. The crisp water surged around their legs as they headed for the beach. "You did this. I don't know how, but I'm pretty sure you had something to do with it," he said. "I told you that I helped you get her into the water." "Who are you people?" he asked and chuckled in bewilderment. Big Riff scaled the side of the railboat in one leap and landed hard on the deck. The Rosalind floated backwards, away from the shore. He got on his feet as fast as he could to help her climb the railing before the current took the boat any farther out to sea, but she was gone. He looked back and forth along the bow, but found no signs of her. He strained his eyes to focus into the murky and savage waves. She wasn't trapped underneath the water either. "Hello?" he yelled into the darkness. "Where are you?" He paused for a reply. The only sounds were the creaking of the Rosalind rocking in the tide and the soft lapping of the waves on the shoreline. Then he heard a little girl giggling in the distance. Goosebumps covered his arms as he looked toward the beach. That same red balloon bounced along the sand. The little girl in the red dress skipped from the tree line, casually chasing her toy again. Big Riff gripped the railing, his knuckles turning white. This time he decided not to leave the boat. He wanted no part of whatever time-trapped cycle might possess this island. The Rosalind accelerated backward into the darkness of the deep ocean. Big Riff didn't move, didn't even blink, until the island was just a speck of sand in the distance. When he could no longer see land anymore, he slumped to the deck, and his hand rested on something soft. He looked down and raised the item to his face for a closer look. That same torn red dress hung loosely over his fingers. Big Riff was startled awake by the Rosalind stopping violently on the shoreline of another island. Adrenaline pounding through his veins, he jumped up and rubbed his eyes. Searching the deck, he found no trace of the red dress. Vanished. The railboat lodged between two large rocks a few yards from the beach. He immediately noticed this island was different. The topography changed abruptly to jagged rocks only a few feet from where the ocean met the shore. Climbing from the boat, he crossed the sand in mere seconds and crawled like a toddler over the rocks. Their pointy tips cut into his palms, and the few times he slipped, they sliced open his pants. After traveling far enough over the rocks to where he couldn't hear the pounding of the waves anymore, he could see a shack in the center of a dirt field. When he reached the end of the rocky terrain, he stood upright. The structure was constructed of 3 solid walls. The 4th wall consisted of metal bars like a jail cell. Big Riff listened intently for any signs of life. A subtle movement came from inside the makeshift prison. "Hello?" he called. The movement stopped. "You're here already? Come closer so I can see if you're Riff or a different one." Big Riff warily stepped toward the cell and stopped close enough to look through the bars. A man sat on a bench, his knees tucked to his chin, his face hidden by long disheveled hair. The threads of his sleeves were unraveling. He was barefoot and smelled rancid. "Who are you?" Big Riff asked, keeping his distance. The man lifted his head. "Biggles?" Big Riff exclaimed. "Not on this island. Biggles only exist on the Rosalind, just like you only exist wherever you're headed. All of you are from somewhere, even if you've never been there yet." "You are Biggles. You look just like..." The man sprang from the bench and shot an arm through the bars. "Biggles drives my damn boat. I haven't been out of this room in almost 2 centuries, while that son of a bitch does whatever he wants with my Rosalind." 200 years? You're crazy, man. "How did Mary start the bisect this time?" the man asked. "What did she do to trigger your journey tonight? How did you know..." "Just answer the damn question." "I stole a mandolin. From that moment on, everything's been like something out of the Twilight Zone." "Stole a mandolin? Wow, she's getting lazy," the man said, chuckling. "I guess you stopped caring about originality. A few lives ago, she would have plotted some real doozies to activate the bisect. I'm a little disappointed in her creative integrity, to be honest." "This is ridiculous. I'm taking the boat and I'm leaving," Big Riff said and turned toward the jagged rocks. "You'll only drift right back to another island. There's no returning. Not to any sort of real life anyway. This is your fate. You'll keep bouncing from island to island until you find one that suits you. And there, you'll stay forever. And alone. Unless, of course, another one of you lands on that island too. But by then, you'll have grown senile and deranged." "Another one of me?" Big Riff asked as he remembered Mary and Biggles mentioning something about last time involving cattlemen and Glen Shield, or something like, "You're not implying reincarnation, are you?" "I'm implying penance. Punishment." "Punishment for who?" "For you. For me," the man answered. "I'm you, and you're me. Biggles is us. I know this isn't the first time tonight you recognize yourself. The car. The red convertible. Yes, you caught a glimpse in the side view mirror of myself. I saw myself in both reflections, sitting in the car. And you? You remind me of myself. And Biggles. There's something familiar about him also." "Who are you?" "I've explained and apologized so many times now, with each incarnation of you, that I don't believe it's heartfelt anymore. I'm not really sure I care either. May I ask one more question? What was Mary doing when you met her?" "She was a stripper named Kelpie." The man exploded into hysterics, laughing so hard he doubled over, grabbing his sides, and eventually had to lie on the floor. He slapped the dirt as he caught his breath between laughs. After a few moments, he collected himself and wiped tears from his eyes. "Oh, that's classic. That might be the best one yet. A stripper? Oh, jeez." He sounded like he was ready to burst into laughter again, but composed himself. "A Kelpie, you say?" "Yeah, that was her stage name." "Do you even know what a Kelpie is?" "I don't think so." "It's a shape-shifting water spirit. I think you misunderstood her. Mary was her stage name. She was using her real name as a stripper. You have it backward." "You mean she's not real?" "Oh, she's real, all right. And I'm afraid I put you in this predicament." "You?" "I was a whale hunter. I've killed hundreds, selling their blubber to the highest payer. I had 3 children and a young wife. Before I started whaling, we didn't have enough money to eat more than once a day. So I worked on a fishing boat. It was cheaper for the captain to let me go home with a bucket of fish and dip into his wallet for payment. And then we started whaling. That's when the money really came rolling in, and I got greedy. Money speaks, and on a whaleboat, soft hearts lose. And that's how I wound up in here, forever. By killing whales? Wasn't it legal to kill whales back then? And how have you managed to stay alive for so many years? True, it was legal to hunt whales, but I murdered 2 very special ones. And that was my and your downfall. Why were those whales so important? They were Kelpie's parents. The words were sprayed to the wind. Silence hung heavily in the air. What does this have to do with me? This is retribution for my crimes, an infinite imprisonment. And you're part of her revenge. She'll never forgive me. Her fury runs too deep. Keeping me in this tiny room for all eternity isn't satisfying enough. She wants to punish me over and over, as many times as she can, as often as she can. So she keeps creating more versions of me. And each one, which is what you are, another version of me, is sentenced here among a limitless row of islands. Each new me who she creates is another means to abuse us, while keeping me here in the cell. All of you are paying my dues. I'm not buying a word of this crazy talk. If Biggles is just another version of you too, why is he not banished here also? My theory is Kelpie can't come out here, and she'd die if she travels too far after the bisect happens. She needs someone to transport each prisoner from the real world to the nothingness. I'm convinced Biggles, the backstabbing bastard, was offered some kind of deal. If he continues to work for her, he won't be stuck here himself, Big Riff finished. Exactly. He's her little loyal puppy, the man spat out on the ground in disgust. And he's got my Rosalind. I have the Rosalind, not him. He disappeared when we reached the first island and left it behind. Don't be foolish. That's just another version of her. Like you're another version of me. The real Rosalind is back in the real world with Biggles at the helm. The real Rosalind is the one that gets us through the bisect. I still don't know what that is. The bisect is a point where the real world splits into the alternate universe where we are now. The separation from reality to this purgatory can't happen unless a specific incident occurs. An action not only influenced by Kelpie, but so completely out of character for us that Mother Nature herself loses a grip on our control. Mother Nature doesn't just roll over and die though. She deploys her lackeys in the form of recognizable beings to try to save us before we reach Rosalind. Kelpie acts like she's protecting us, but really, they're the ones trying to save us. Stealing that fucking mandolin. And the police weren't really police? They're trying to save me from her? God damn it, Big Riff yelled. It doesn't matter. She would have gotten you at some point anyway. There's no escaping your fate. Being a prisoner on all these islands? No. Being me. There are probably thousands of me, you, out here roaming these islands. And there'll be an infinite more born, just to be herded here for her sick, sadistic amusement and revenge. Big Riff absent-mindedly moved his foot back and forth in the dirt. Deep down, you believe me. Deep down, you know this is true, the man said. There's absolutely no way back? Even if I wait until the next bisect and I navigate the boat, there's no returning, Riff. You're stuck in an endless loop of traveling from island to island. My suggestion? Pick one. Find one that speaks to you, hunker down, and accept your fate. Think of it as an eternal vacation to the overcast tropics. I loved her, Big Riff mumbled. Don't feel too betrayed. She's not human, remember? Wait a minute. Who are the girls? What girls? The last island I visited had a young girl with a balloon and an older girl with a torn dress. She was supposed to get on the boat with me, but she disappeared. And then the young girl reappeared again. Big Riff fell silent. Girls? Out here? Impossible. That doesn't make any sense. Big Riff remained silent, staring 1,000 miles away. Riff, you okay? Hello? I needed to return to that island. I think Mary was trying to tell me something. If that's true, you should be very afraid. It's gotta be a trick or, even worse, a trap of some kind. If I recover anything, I'll come back and let you know. Big Riff ran toward the jagged rocks, ending the palaver. The man watched through the bars as Big Riff reached the beach. Can you forgive me? The man yelled as loud as he could. In the distance, he barely deciphered Big Riff's answer. No. Big Riff jumped over the side of the whaleboat the moment the rudders scraped along the sand. He moved as fast as his legs could carry him through the knee-deep salt water. Hello? He called as he reached the beach. Are you still here? The red balloon hopped directly toward him from the forest, and he exploded in a full sprint. Reaching the tree line, he bent and picked up the balloon. It was real, tangible. A part of him thought the balloon might vanish when he touched it. He gripped the balloon as he entered the forest. Hello? Silence. I have your balloon. If you want it back, please say something. The next sound was deafening. Big Riff dropped the balloon and frantically stuck his index fingers into his ears to help muffle the unbearable noise and to stop the pain. He closed his eyes tightly and curled into the fetal position. Then, just as abruptly as it started, everything went silent. Big Riff slowly opened his eyes and removed his fingers from his ears. Standing in front of him was a young boy with an electric guitar and a stereo. Why are you here? The boy asked. Big Riff rose to his feet. I'm looking for two girls, one with a torn dress and the other lost her balloon. I found it and I wanted to give it back to her. Mary didn't lose her balloon. She never loses her balloon. Mary? Oh, this just keeps getting better. And yes, she did. I have it right. Big Riff looked behind him, but he couldn't locate the balloon. Mary has her balloon. She always has her balloon, the boy repeated. Big Riff watched him walk away, guitar slung around his back, stereo in one hand. Then he flinched when something touched his hand. Little Mary had intertwined her fingers with his, and in her other hand was a red balloon. Mary? Hi, Riff. Is it really you? Come on. She wants to see you. They walked hand in hand through the forest, the beach farther behind them with each step. Big Riff tried to clear his throat, but the sudden onset of fear made it difficult. The sound of a thunderous voice booming at the little girl startled Big Riff. Mary, where's my dinner? It's coming, Grandpapa, the little girl said to an old man sitting on a fallen tree stump. Humph, always late with my food. He stroked his white beard with dirty fingers. Kelpie, where's my whiskey? He yelled in a different direction. Right here, Grandpapa, a female voice answered. The older girl with the torn red dress stepped from behind a tree, holding a chalice. She handed the drink to the old man. He tossed the alcohol into his open mouth, drops of liquid spilling on his beard. He threw the glass on the forest floor, slapped both knees with his palms, and stood, revealing his full 10-foot height. Come here, lad. Big Riff's knees buckled, and his stomach tightened. He had to will his body to take a handful of steps toward the giant old man. Big Riff glanced at little Mary. She nodded and smiled in reassurance. Grandpapa, stop it. You're frightening him, Kelpie said. There's no reason to be afraid. The old man never removed his stare from Big Riff. The boy with the guitar stepped from behind a tree. Grandpapa, do you want me to call Biggles? Yes, son. I'm calling all my children home. The boy turned on his stereo and readjusted the guitar from around his back to the front of his body. He strummed the strings only once, but with such force, Big Riff thought his hearing would never recover. The sound traveled across the vast mystical ocean. and within moments, Big Riff heard a horn in the distance. "Here he comes," the boy said. "Biggles? But you said he's the one who ripped your dress," Big Riff said, summoning enough courage to speak to the teenage girl. Kelpie walked straight for Big Riff, grabbed a fistful of his shirt, and pressed her lips firmly against his. "Welcome to the family," the old man said and began to laugh. Kelpie released her kiss and took a step backward. "You're taking Biggles' place now." Excuse me? Kelpie has always spared the one who loves her most, and you've proved without a doubt that your feelings for my granddaughter runs the deepest," the old man answered, "and that includes more so than Biggles." The Rosalind was anchored just offshore as our captain tramped through the forest. Biggles' eyes grew wide when he saw Big Riff standing with the rest of them. Oh shit. Realization of why he had been summoned filled his veins with ice-cold fear. The only time Biggles had ever visited here was when he had been the one patiently waiting for the previous captain to arrive so Biggles could take the poor man's place. Biggles turned so hastily to escape that he tripped on a tree root. "Oh, you poor mortal," the old man said, chuckling. "Look how scared you are now. Not the big tough guy who thought he could manhandle my Kelpie anymore. Go back to the beach. You'll find your new boat waiting for you." Biggles didn't move. "Go!" the old man yelled so loudly the leaves shuddered, a handful floating to the ground. "You've been relieved of your duties. You've been replaced." Biggles scampered for a few yards, then darted for the beach. Two identical boats were now on the shoreline. He dove headfirst into the water, forever relinquishing his special privileges as captain to the original Rosalind. Biggles disappeared into the mist, piloting his new whaleboat into the vast darkness of unending purgatory. "Ready?" she asked Big Riff and released her gentle hold of his hand. "Do I have a choice?" He laughed and anchored the Rosalind. "So when I was chatting with Shh, don't ever speak his name." "Okay. When we were talking, he said you can't ever enter the islands. I remember when the bisect happened, how Biggles had to get you to safety, and you were in a panic. How were you able to be on that island where I found you?" "It isn't part of the perdition. It's my home. Only the purest of hearts can reach it." "But I didn't recognize you until your name was spoken." "Don't you even remember what my name means?" She answered with a riddle and placed a soft kiss on his lips. Big Riff intertwined his fingers with the frayed slits of her red dress. "Biggles didn't hurt me. It was boat propellers. I was careless while swimming." "Why did you say it was him?" "Biggles had loved me for so long that I didn't think Grandpapa would let me replace him unless I gave him the impression that he had hurt me. Come on, we're going to be late. We're wasting time." "Yeah, because we only have eternity together," he replied sarcastically. "Now unless another version of you loves me even more one day," she said and playfully winked. Big Riff realized if Biggles could be relieved of his post that swiftly by a fabricated story, obviously no one was her captain forever. They left the Rosalind and walked along the pier toward the roadway. The afternoon sun wasn't adding any warmth to the winter air. They turned the corner to Main Street, and Big Riff stumbled over the legs of a man sleeping on the sidewalk. "I'm terrible sorry," he said. The man stirred, and an empty wine bottle rolled off the curb and lodged itself in the gutter. The inside of his jacket was lined with the money section of the local newspaper for added insulation and warmth. Big Riff gasped when the man brushed his long, scraggly hair from his face and fell back asleep. "Willie?" The man opened one eye. "Riff? Kelpie?" he grunted, trying to sit. "Look at you. You're so young. How do you guys look the same as you did when you both disappeared? What, 20 years ago now?" Big Riff looked suspiciously at Kelpie while he nervously played with his gold wedding ring. She shrugged her shoulders at him as if to answer, "What do you want me to say? Time works differently now." "Do you need anything?" she asked. It'll make both of us feel better if you had some money. I don't need your cash. Then Willie laughed. They'd probably be my dollar bills anyway. And you, Riff? You look all spiffy. You like the new style? He replied, sticking out his gold-tipped boots and spinning around to model his black jacket and tie. Kelpie giggled and lovingly stroked his elbow. Here's our ride, babe. A black stretch limousine stopped in front of them, and the rear door opened by itself. Willie crawled to the gutter and retrieved his empty wine bottle. The figures. I'm going back to sleep, he muttered. As Kelpie and Big Riff got comfortable in the back of the limousine, the divider glass lowered slowly and the driver twisted his body to speak. It's really good to have you here with me, Mary. Big Riff shot the driver a menacing stare, firing invisible daggers. He knew that look. He knew that tone of voice. It reminded him too much of how he used to look and talk to Kelpie himself. If this man was in love with her, he'd jeopardize Big Riff's mere existence and job security. I'm glad you called, Mary. It's been a while. I thought you'd forgotten about me. How could I ever forget you and your hospitality? Plus, I thought Riff and I should arrive in style this time. Well, you'll certainly look like one of the nobles tonight. I made sure she was washed and waxed. Aw, you're too sweet. Nothing's too good for my Mary. Big Riff wanted to either vomit all over the interior of the vehicle or punch this loser in the throat. After what felt like a much longer ride than it should have been, the limousine stopped in front of the opera house. The driver pushed a button in his center console, and the rear door opened slowly. Big Riff slid his wallet from his back pocket and covertly guided it to the car's floorboard with the back of his boot. I'll be waiting in the limo parking area, the driver said. We'll find you, Kelpie replied. She and Big Riff climbed the stairs to the sprawling marble theater. The limousine maneuvered into traffic and disappeared around the corner. Oh shit, Big Riff exclaimed. What? I left my wallet in the limo. All right. I'll wait for you at the box office. Thanks, sweetie. He gave her a peck on the lips. I'll be quick. Big Riff ran down the stairs, skipping 3 at a time, and never slowed his pace when he hit the sidewalk. He spotted the limousine in the designated parking lot and slowed his breathing to a more normal rate. When he composed himself, he knocked on the driver's side window. The moment the top of the glass cleared the driver's shoulders, Big Riff reached in and grabbed the driver's neck. He squirmed and fought, grabbing Big Riff's wrist, struggling for air. You can't have her, Big Riff whispered, thrusting his thumbs straight into the driver's trachea. And you won't take my job from me. Within moments, the driver stopped twitching and was lifeless. Big Riff leaned across his body and pressed the door release button. Retrieving his wallet, he jogged toward the opera house. The crowd bottlenecked as he got closer to the front of the building. He shuffled along at their pace, shoulder to shoulder with men in expensive suits and women in elegant evening dresses. He saw Kelpie waiting at the top of the stairs looking for him. When she spied Big Riff in the crowd, she waved enthusiastically. Just as he raised his arm to wave back, a small hand grabbed his elbow and pulled it back down. He turned his head to see little Mary's red balloon skipping along with the crowd, dancing as it got kicked to and fro by the theater-goer's shoes as with each step they took. He looked around frantically to find his wife's little sister in the crowd. I know what you just did, Mary whispered in his ear, but he couldn't see her anywhere. I can't lose her. I can't sail forever on those seas. You killed one of her pets. You robbed her of administering her punishment. You took away her ability to avenge our parents' death. It was just one person. She has thousands of others. I was protecting myself. What do you want from me? I've always wanted you for myself, she whispered. I just need you to betray her first. You're my toy now. I own you. And I'm going to do things to you to make you wish you had been condemned to only sailing those seas for eternity. It's been far too long since I had a servant to play with. Are you ever lonely,
Just like me?
Big Riff shoved his fingers into his ears to muffle the piercing blast of the guitar as his skin tingled and became electrified. Before he processed another thought, he felt as if his limbs were being ripped from his torso. And then everything went black. Kelpie stopped waving when she saw Big Riff put his fingers in his ears and vanish from the sidewalk. She sighed and let her chin drop to her chest. She shook her head in disgust and disappointment. "Mary, damn you for stealing another one from me," she whispered to herself. Kelpie headed toward the limousine parking area to tell the driver the good news. He was next in line to take Big Riff's place. Wasn't that a wonderful story? Please come back again real soon. Until then, bye-bye.